Ladies and gentlemen, there are moments in life when the weight of our struggles feels heavier than our own strength, when the road ahead seems swallowed by shadows, and every step forward feels like pushing against an unseen curse. Maybe you've walked through seasons where nothing made sense, where prayers felt unanswered, doors stayed shut, and the very dreams you once held with confidence slipped through your fingers. Maybe you questioned your purpose, your worth, or even wondered if God still sees you in the chaos. But it's in these very moments when life feels cursed, when darkness whispers that hope is gone, that heaven does its greatest work. For every shadow you've stood in, there is a light that has never stopped shining for you. Every tear you cried has been counted. Every battle you faced has been shaping you, preparing you, strengthening the very core of who you are. What looks like the end is often the birthplace of your breakthrough. What appears as a curse may be the seed of a blessing you cannot yet see. There is a divine truth pulsing beneath the pain, a reminder that God does not abandon his children in the fire. He steps into the fire with them. When everything around you feels broken, when your spirit is weary, and when the night feels endless, there is a hand reaching for you, a whisper calling your name, a light guiding you even when your eyes can't see it. And today, as we step into this message together, I invite you to open your heart to the possibility that what feels like your darkest moment may actually be the doorway to your greatest transformation. For even in the places you thought were cursed, God is preparing to show you that his light has been with you all along. When we speak of God transforming every dark season into a pathway toward unexpected blessing, we are acknowledging a truth woven throughout the fabric of Scripture and human experience. Life often brings us into valleys where the ground feels unsteady, where circumstances seem hostile, and where the weight of uncertainty presses heavily on the heart. In those moments, it is easy to interpret struggle as punishment or chaos as divine silence. Yet the very essence of faith is learning to trust that God is at work even when nothing around you affirms. When you walk through seasons that feel cursed, you are not abandoned but being cultivated, refined, and positioned for a blessing that may be invisible in the moment but is already in motion. It is in these dark seasons that God does some of his most transformative work, shaping your identity, building your resilience, and preparing you for a level of purpose you may not have imagined. What feels like loss may actually be protection. What feels like delay may be divine alignment. What feels like weakness may be the birthplace of supernatural strength. God never wastes suffering, and he never leaves his children stranded in the shadows without a plan that reaches far beyond the pain. In these moments, the human heart is stretched, challenged, and sometimes broken open so something deeper can grow. When everything familiar feels stripped away, when disappointments pile up, and when your prayers seem unanswered, it is easy to question whether God is actually working. Yet the unseen hand of God is often most active when our circumstances appear most barren. Just as a seed must be buried before it can break open and grow, our lives often must pass through seasons of darkness before the fullness of God's intention can emerge. The burial of the seed is not the death of purpose, but the preparation for fruitfulness. Likewise, the hardships you face are not indicators of defeat, but indicators that something is germinating beneath the surface. God sees what you cannot see. He knows what lies ahead. He understands what you must walk through in order to carry what he has planned for you. When the night seems longest and your heart feels heaviest, that is often the moment when God is forming the very foundation for the blessing that will eventually rise. These dark seasons also serve as teachers, exposing the parts of us we rarely confront when life is easy. They reveal the depth of our trust, the authenticity of our hope, and the resilience of our spirit. When everything is going well, faith can remain shallow, untested, and fragile. But in the seasons where you feel stretched thin, where you must hold on to God not because you feel him, but because you know him, your faith deepens, your perspective widens, your capacity expands. The storm does not come to destroy you, but to develop you. In the depths of challenge, you discover strength you did not know you had, clarity you had prayed for but never expected to receive this way, and wisdom that could not have been gained in comfort. God transforms adversity into training ground, shaping you in ways that only hardship can accomplish. When he allows you to enter a season that feels cursed, he is preparing you for an elevation that requires greater spiritual maturity, greater endurance, and deeper trust than you possessed before. It is also in these seasons that God removes things, people, or mindsets that were never meant to accompany you into your next level. What you interpret as loss may actually be divine subtraction to make room for divine addition. Sometimes God will close a door because what's behind it no longer aligns with the purpose He has placed within you. Sometimes friendships fade because their season in your life has served its purpose. Sometimes opportunities disappear because they would have taken you down a path that was too small for what God intends to build in you. These removals may feel painful, confusing, or even unfair, but they are purposeful. God's pruning is not punishment, it is preparation for abundance. Just as a gardener cuts away branches that hinder growth, God cuts away what hinders your calling, positioning you for greater fruitfulness. The pain of pruning is temporary, but the harvest it produces is lasting. As God transforms dark seasons, He also shifts your perspective. What once felt like a curse begins to look like a catalyst. What once felt like abandonment begins to reveal itself as divine orchestration. You begin to recognize the subtle ways God was guiding you all along, even when His presence felt hidden. You see that the setback protected you from wrong timing. You realize that the disappointment redirected you towards something better. You understand that the delay strengthened your character. Transformation often happens quietly beneath the surface, while the visible world seems unchanged. But over time, the pieces come together and you begin to see how every painful moment was woven into a larger narrative filled with purpose. In these seasons, God also draws you closer to Him in ways that comfort alone never could. When you reach the end of your own strength, you discover Him. When your plans fall apart, His plans begin to unfold. When life feels cursed, His presence becomes your anchor. You learn to lean, to listen, to surrender, and to trust at deeper levels. Your relationship with God becomes more intimate, more personal, and more grounded. You begin to recognize that the blessing is not only in the outcome, but in the journey of becoming someone who can carry the blessing with wisdom and humility. The darkness teaches you dependence, it teaches you patience, it teaches you spiritual sensitivity. These qualities become the foundation upon which God builds greater assignments, greater influence, and greater purpose in your life. Through all of this, the most powerful transformation occurs within you. While you are waiting for circumstances to change, God is changing. While you are asking Him to fix the situation, He is strengthening your spirit. While you are hoping for blessings to unfold around you, He is cultivating blessings within you. This inner work is often the true miracle, the deeper blessing that equips you for everything He has promised. By the time the breakthrough arrives, you are no longer the same person who entered the dark season. You are stronger, wiser, more grounded, and more aligned with your purpose. The season that felt cursed has become the very season that equipped you for your call. And when the blessing finally manifests, you begin to understand why the path looked the way it did, why the darkness was necessary, and why God allowed you to walk through moments you didn't understand at the time. The transformation becomes evident, not only in what God gives you, but in who you have become through the process. When we say that inner faith becomes the light that guides us when life feels cursed, we are acknowledging a spiritual truth that goes beyond emotion, beyond circumstance, and beyond the shifting realities of daily life. Inner faith is not simply belief in better days, it is the deep-rooted assurance that God is present, even when His presence is not immediately felt. It is the quiet strength that rises when everything else around you seems to collapse. When the world feels dark, faith becomes illumination from within, a spiritual lamp that reveals the next step when you cannot see the entire path. In seasons where hardship presses heavily on your soul, it is this inner faith that whispers truth louder than fear, reminding you that you are not abandoned, not forgotten, and not defeated. This light does not eliminate the challenges you face, but it empowers you to walk through them with courage, clarity, and confidence that God is guiding every step. Faith shines brightest when circumstances are darkest. It is in the moments when life feels cursed, when the weight of sorrow, uncertainty, and disappointment threatens to overwhelm you, that the light of faith becomes essential. This light is not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it flickers softly, calling you to trust what God has spoken rather than what you see. The darkness may try to convince you that there is no way forward, but faith reminds you that God specializes in creating pathways where none exist. Faith is the internal flame that refuses to go out, even when the winds of life blow fiercely against you. It is the gentle yet powerful assurance that God is still in control, even when everything feels out of control. Through faith, you learn that darkness is not the indicator of God's absence, but the stage upon which his power becomes most visible. This inner faith becomes a compass, redirecting your thoughts and emotions when negativity tries to dominate your mind. When life feels cursed, your natural reaction might be to spiral into fear, frustration, or hopelessness. But faith interrupts that spiral. Faith lifts your eyes above the problem and reminds you of God's promises. It shifts your focus from what has gone wrong to what God is still able to do. Faith reinforces that God's word remains true, regardless of how chaotic the circumstances appear. This inner light guides your decisions, keeping you aligned with the truth rather than being pulled off course by despair or confusion. It helps you rise each day with renewed strength, even when the night before felt unbearable. Faith becomes the stabilizing force that keeps you grounded when everything around you feels shaken. As faith grows stronger within you, it begins to transform the way you see your circumstance. Instead of interpreting every difficulty as a curse, you begin to look for God's hand at work. Faith trains your heart to expect divine intervention, even in situations that seem impossible. It teaches you to look beyond surface-level challenges and recognize that God may be orchestrating something greater behind the scenes. Faith gives you the courage to keep praying, keep believing, and keep moving forward when giving up feels easier. It reassures you that the darkness has an expiration date, and that God's light will always prevail in the end. Through faith, you develop spiritual vision that sees potential in places where others only see obstacles. This shift in perspective allows you to navigate hardship with grace, patience, and strength that does not come from your own abilities but from God working within you. Inner faith also strengthens your identity. When life feels cursed, you may begin to question who you are, whether you matter or whether you have anything left to offer, but faith reaffirms your worth, reminding you that you are chosen, beloved, and divinely equipped. Faith reminds you that your identity is not defined by your circumstances but by the one who created you. It reinforces the truth that no attack, setback, or disappointment has the power to strip away the purpose God has placed on your life. As this inner light grows, it keeps you anchored in truth, even when the enemy tries to sow lies into your mind. Faith becomes your reminder that you carry divine strength, divine resilience, and divine purpose that cannot be diminished by temporary seasons of darkness. This inner faith also nurtures your ability to persevere. When challenges stretch you beyond your comfort zone, faith reminds you that endurance is part of the journey. It empowers you to push through the discomfort, trusting that God is using every moment to fortify you from the inside out. Perseverance rooted in faith is not about suppressing your emotions or pretending everything is fine. It is about choosing to trust God through the pain rather than allowing the pain to dictate your steps. Faith encourages you to bring your weaknesses, your fears, and your doubts before God, knowing He meets you with strength, peace, and clarity. It reminds you that endurance is not a burden but a pathway to blessings that cannot be accessed any other way. In this way, faith becomes both your strength and your guide, leading you through each step of the storm with unwavering hope. As faith guides your life, it also draws you deeper into God's presence. The darker the season, the more you lean into His voice. The heavier the burden, the closer you cling to His promises. Faith turns your prayers into lifelines, connecting you to divine wisdom and comfort that cannot be found anywhere else. You begin to recognize God's presence not only in the miraculous moments, but in the small, quiet ways He sustains you day by day. Faith teaches you to listen for His whispers, trust His timing, and rest in His assurance that He is working for your good. This deepened spiritual intimacy becomes one of the greatest blessings that emerges from the darkest seasons. Through faith, you discover that God is not only your rescuer but your companion, guiding you with love, patience, and unwavering commitment. This inner light also influences the atmosphere around you. When your faith shines, it impacts your conversations, your choices, your relationships, and your responses to adversity. Others begin to notice the strength within you, the peace you carry, and the hope you refuse to let go of. Your faith becomes a testimony that inspires others to trust God in their own struggles. Without even trying, your light becomes a beacon for those walking through their own darkness. This influence is not born from perfection, but from the authenticity of someone who has walked through storms and still believes in the goodness of God. Your faith becomes a living example that God is able to sustain, restore, and elevate those who trust in Him. Through this journey, Inner faith gradually transforms the very atmosphere of your heart. Where fear once dominated, peace begins to grow. Where doubt once clouded your mind, confidence in God's promises begins to take root. Where despair once tried to overwhelm you, hope rises with new strength. Faith does not deny the existence of darkness. It simply refuses to let darkness have the final word. It teaches you to navigate uncertainty with courage, to face adversity with determination, and to walk through life's most difficult moments with a spiritual light that cannot be extinguished. When we say that what appears as a setback is often the doorway to divine breakthrough, we are acknowledging a truth that challenges the natural mind but strengthens the spiritual one. Life presents moments that feel like abrupt endings, plans falling apart, opportunities slipping away, relationships dissolving, dreams delayed beyond understanding. In these times you may feel as though everything you hoped for is collapsing in front of you. Yet the mystery of God's work is that He often hides breakthroughs inside the very places we label as failures or disappointments. A setback in the divine perspective is rarely the punishment it appears to be. Instead, it is often a redirection, a repositioning, and a preparation that moves you closer to what God has destined for you. While you see setback, God sees setup. While you see a closed door, God sees protection. While you see loss, God sees the clearing of space for something greater to take root. Setbacks have a way of stripping away illusions of control, reminding you that your journey is guided by a higher wisdom and not solely by your plan. When your path is disrupted, you are forced to pause, reassess, and listen more intently for God's leading. In this stillness, divine revelation often flows in ways it never would have during seasons of ease. Setbacks slow you down long enough for God to speak into your situation, revealing truths, strategies, or insights that were previously hidden. What felt like an interruption becomes a moment of divine clarity. The very circumstances that seem to push you backward become catalysts for a deeper understanding of God's heart, His intentions, and His timing for your life. This shift in perspective allows you to see that divine breakthrough often begins with divine interruption. These apparent setbacks also break open areas of your life that need transformation before you can step into what God has prepared for you. There are blessings that require maturity, discipline, or spiritual alignment, and setbacks create the space for that internal work to happen. When something doesn't go the way you expected, it reveals the parts of your character that still need refining. Whether it's patience, humility, confidence, or trust, setbacks expose internal weaknesses not to shame you but to strengthen you. They reveal attitudes that need shifting, fears that need uprooting, and habits that need breaking. Without these moments of difficulty, you might carry old patterns into new seasons, hindering the full manifestation of what God desires to bring forth in your life. So the setback becomes a pruning moment, cutting away what cannot go with you into the breakthrough that is being prepared. Furthermore, what appears as a setback often protects you from stepping into something premature. Timing is a crucial component of breakthrough, and God's timing rarely aligns with human urgency. There are opportunities that look promising but would weigh you down if experienced too soon. There are relationships that feel comfortable but would limit your growth. There are environments that appear beneficial but could harm your spirit or distract you from your calling. Setbacks in this context operate as divine shields. They close doors that would have led you into unnecessary struggle. They delay progress until the proper season has arrived. They disrupt plans that would have taken you outside of God's will. This divine protection is often misunderstood because pain blinds you to purpose in the moment, but hindsight reveals that the setback was actually grace in disguise. Setbacks also prepare the environment for your breakthrough. Sometimes God has to shift circumstances, align people, or rearrange external factors before you can step into what He has promised. What looks like stagnation is often God orchestrating events behind the scenes. People who do not belong in your next season are moved away. Opportunities that would overwhelm you are withheld. Connections you need in the future are woven together quietly. Breakthrough is not only about your readiness but about the readiness of the environment you are stepping into. God ensures that when you walk through the door of breakthrough, both you and the space you enter are in alignment for maximum impact. So while it may look like nothing is happening, the divine stage is being set, and the setback becomes the pause that precedes divine orchestration. Another powerful dimension of setbacks is the way they stir hunger, focus, and determination within you. When everything comes easily, you may lose sight of purpose or settle for less than what God intends. But setbacks awaken something deep within the soul. They remind you of how much you desire what God has promised. They renew your commitment, they sharpen your focus, they strip away distractions and push you to lean on God with greater intensity. This spiritual hunger becomes fuel for breakthrough. Instead of passively hoping for change, you begin to contend for it in prayer and faith and in obedience. Setbacks ignite a fire within you that prepares you to steward your breakthrough with gratitude, responsibility, and strength. Setbacks also build testimony. The story of breakthrough is incomplete without the struggle that came before it. Your season of setback becomes the very evidence of God's power when breakthrough finally arrives. The contrast between where you were and where God takes you magnifies His glory, encourages others, and strengthens your faith for future battles. People are inspired not by stories of ease, but by stories of resilience, redemption, and divine turnaround. What felt like your lowest point becomes the foundation of a testimony that carries weight, authority, and impact. God uses your setback to write a narrative that will speak life into others who are walking through their own dark season. In addition, setbacks reveal the faithfulness of God in ways you may never experience without them. When everything is falling apart and yet you find unexpected peace, that is God. When you feel weak yet somehow keep moving forward, that is God. When resources seem scarce but provision still comes, that is God. When you feel alone yet comfort surrounds you, that is God. These subtle expressions of divine nearness become more visible in seasons of setback because your heart is more open, more sensitive, and more dependent. You begin to recognize that breakthrough is not only the moment when everything changes, but also the many small miracles that sustain you until that moment arrives. Setbacks teach you to see God in the details, not just in the resolution. As you walk through these seasons, the deeper revelation begins to surface. The setback did not block your destiny, it guided you toward it. The setback did not diminish your potential, it refined it. The setback was not a sign of God's rejection, but a sign of His preparation. You begin to realize that every disappointment held divine intention, every closed door hid divine wisdom, and every delay protected divine timing. What looked like loss was making room. What felt like confusion was divine rearranging. What seemed like failure was preparing you for expansion. In this understanding, you stop viewing setbacks as threats and begin recognizing them as divine thresholds between where you are and where God is taking you. Eventually, you reach the moment where breakthrough becomes visible, not only in the shift of circumstances, but in the shift within your spirit. You recognize that the strength you gained, the wisdom you developed, the faith you nurtured, and the endurance you built were all part of the blessing. The breakthrough is not just the outcome, but the transformation that happened along the way. The setback was not the end of your story, but the opening chapter of a greater one God was preparing to unfold through you. There comes a moment when you must decide that the darkness you've walked through will not define you, that the curses spoken over your life will not shape you, and that the setbacks you've endured will not have the final word. There comes a moment when you rise not because everything suddenly became easy, but because you finally recognize the strength God planted in you long before the struggle began. You rise because you understand that every battle has been building you, every valley has been teaching you, and every night season has been preparing you for the dawn that is now breaking over your life. This is your moment to stand in the truth that God has been with you in every shadow, guiding your steps, whispering hope into your spirit, and weaving purpose through the pain. This is your moment to declare that what felt cursed is now being transformed, that what felt lost is being restored, and that the light that has carried you is about to shine brighter than it ever has before. You may have walked through darkness, but you are not defined by dark. You are defined by the God who brings beauty from ashes, strength from sorrow, and breakthrough from the very places where hope seemed impossible. And now, as you step into the next season of your life, may your spirit rise with a renewed boldness. May your heart awaken to the truth that the story is shifting in your favor. May your faith ignite with fresh fire. May your eyes open to the miracles already forming around you, because this is not the end of your journey. This is the turning point. This is where the curse breaks, where the light returns, and where God Himself steps forward to do what only He can do.